Hi, ma'am. Your yard is totally out of control. Can I cut it?
No, thank you. Please leave. I cannot afford any lawn services.
Wait, please. I'm not charging you anything. It's 100% free.
Free? Nobody does anything for free anymore. Are you lying?
I promise you I'm not lying, Helen. Let me bring your yard back.
Oh my, I was so scared you were another scammer at my door.
I was driving through a quiet rural neighborhood this afternoon when I came across a small, beige stucco house that was completely swallowed by a massive, chaotic sea of weeds. The property looked totally out of control and neglected. In the front yard and around the side paths, thick green bushes, wild brush, and tall climbing vines with tiny white flowers had grown so high that they completely buried the pathways, pushing heavily against the yellow painted walls. Near the back corners and a small white shed, the jungle was even crazier, forming thick green walls of heavy brush that were chest-high and completely blocking the view. To make matters worse, massive fallen logs and thick rotting tree branches were lying scattered across the yard, hidden under the layers of overgrown leaves, creating a very dangerous obstacle course. It was clear nobody had touched this lawn in years. As I walked up toward the front entrance, I knocked on the door and a fragile elderly woman slowly opened it, standing right in the doorway. Her name was Mrs. Helen. She was 85 years old, and she looked incredibly run down as she leaned heavily on a dark wooden walking cane with her right hand just to support her body. She had short, messy white hair and was wearing a loose white house dress. Her wrinkled face was filled with deep suspicion, and she looked strictly guarded against me. I adjusted my white mesh cap, stood politely near her open dark blue front door, and tried to offer some help. I looked right into her eyes and said, "Hi ma'am, your yard is totally out of control. Can I cut it?" Mrs. Helen didn't hesitate to push me away. She stood rigid, glared back at me, and said with a strict, defiant elderly voice, "No, thank you. Please leave. I cannot afford any lawn services." I immediately stepped closer, shook my head gently to calm her down, and said with absolute sincerity, "Wait, please. I'm not charging you anything. It's 100% free." Hearing that single word made Mrs. Helen freeze completely. She stared intensely into my eyes, her defensive expression shifting into total, stunned disbelief. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Free ... Nobody does anything for free anymore. Are you lying?" I kept locked eye contact, nodded firmly, and told her, "I promise you I'm not lying. Helen, let me bring your yard back." Her proud, guarded face completely melted into pure emotional relief. Her eyes filled with tears, and she sighed, "Oh my, I was so scared you were another scammer at my door, that I got my equipment ready." Mrs. Helen stood behind her doorway and shared her story. She had been living completely alone in this house for years since her husband passed away. Relying entirely on a very small monthly social security check, she had zero extra money for property maintenance. Because of her severe physical weakness, she couldn't even pull the starter cord on a small mower, let alone push one through a jungle. To make things worse, a few months ago, a group of heartless scammers had knocked on her door, promised to fix her roof, took her savings as a deposit, and vanished without doing any work. That terrible experience left her deeply traumatized, broke, and fiercely defensive against any strangers who came near her home. When the city code enforcement started sending warnings about the overgrown property, she just hid inside, terrified of getting hit with expensive fines she could never pay. I told her to go rest safely inside in the shade and promised her we would rescue her home. This wasn't a standard mowing job. It was a brutal battle against thick vegetation and hidden dangers. I had to bring out my heavy-duty stand-on commercial mower to tackle the massive green walls. I ran the machine at full throttle, but I had to drive incredibly slow and careful because those massive fallen logs were hiding everywhere under the thick grass. One wrong move could destroy my blades or flip the machine. Dust, leaves, and thick wood chips were flying everywhere under the hot sun. My arms were completely exhausted from lifting the smaller logs out of the way, but every time I felt like stopping, I thought about how scared she was at her door. And it gave me a massive burst of energy to keep pushing forward until every single weed was completely leveled. By the time the sun began to set, the transformation was absolutely beautiful. The suffocating green jungle was completely gone, the massive logs were cleared, and the perimeter of her yellow stucco house looked wide open, clean, and safe once more. When Mrs. Helen slowly stepped back out to the porch, leaning on her cane, she completely froze. She stared at the open grass, her mouth wide open in absolute amazement. She looked at the clean borders, then looked back at me with tears streaming down her cheeks, holding her hand over her heart. She told me that for the first time in months, the heavy cloud of panic and shame was completely gone. She didn't have to be afraid of people knocking on her door anymore. This situation really makes you think about how our system treats isolated, traumatized seniors. Do you think it's fair for city officers to threaten an 85-year-old widow with massive fines when she clearly has zero physical capability to maintain her yard? Or should the local city government be forced to verify a senior's physical health before sending any code violations? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. If you want to help us protect more grandpas and grandmas like Mrs. Helen from these terrifying city fines, please hit that like button and share this video. Your support keeps our machines running. Thanks for watching.